Many of you, it's welcome back to Montreux, but for those of you who are coming here for the first time, welcome. And for those of you who are coming for the first time to what used to be called our Executive Forum, but which is now the World Export Development Forum, I want to welcome you all very warmly. Of course, we have a new name, and that reflects the larger ambitions which we have for this event. And certainly, we think that the subject that we're going to be talking about today is very important given that global trade is expanding, that we see developing and transition economies moving forward, and we see non-tariff barriers becoming even more innovative, and the world at large is recognizing that globalization is very important. So that's the context within which we're talking and meeting today. If we look a little bit at what is the growing importance of trade, there are a few things that I think we'd like to put on the table. Last week, there was an article in the International Herald Tribune which surveyed about 47 countries, large numbers of people in 47 countries. This survey certainly pointed out that everyone was very interested and certainly felt that global trade was of great importance. We also know that trade exports is growing at 4 times the speed of the world economies. And we know that in economies where there is rising expansion of their economies, we also see that they're very heavily involved in global trade. And our research is confirming and has confirmed that livelihoods of people in developing countries are increasing when we consider the effect on global trade. And certainly we see that the fastest growing markets for developing countries are indeed developing countries themselves. So within all of this optimism about globalization, we also recognize that there is a downside, and that not everyone benefits. The gap between the richest countries and the poorest countries in the world is getting even bigger. And I'm continuously staggered to note with what I refer to as the 2% to 50% or the 50% to 1% global score. Simply put, 2% of the world's adult population owns slightly more than half of all global households' wealth. Yet half of the world's population own only 1% of all global wealth. Poverty reduction, inclusive growth, wealth creation must therefore be at the core of our work as we seek to make export impact for good. Now, the WEDF, that's what we're calling it, the agenda here today. We are looking at international trade and how it can have a positive impact on the quality of life and better for all. But this can only be achieved if certain conditions are met. We are still grappling with the how to do this, because we know where and what needs to be done. So the World Export Development Forum is all about the how. The theme of this year's WEDF is entitled, Bringing Down the Barriers, Charting a Dynamic Export Development Agenda. And we aim to contribute fundamentally to that learning. Export development is a complex issue, and we think that if we are going to actually achieve something, we have to look far beyond export promotion and trade policy. So the program reflects this more complex view, and we will be looking at a number of different issues. Strengthening supply-side capacities, reducing the cost of doing business, building markets, and improving the institutional framework. In the plenary brainstorming sessions and in the breakout sessions, we should have a look at all of the issues about what will create a dynamic export environment and an agenda for developing countries. And we believe that specialized network sessions, which we have created at the third day on Thursday, should identify priorities that you, the country delegates, recognize as relevant to you. Now, ITC is evolving, and this evolution is taking place within the context of the developing trade agenda. Our organization, ITC, also has to change and adapt within the context of what is happening in the world. We aspire to be the development partner for export success, and our aim is to achieve export impact for good, working through policymakers, trade support institutions, and small and medium-sized enterprises. To meet the needs of these stakeholders, we're certainly looking at how ITC does its business, and we are looking at the core competencies of the organization and focusing on a few lines of business which we believe will be relevant to you. We, of course, will continue with the work of export strategy. Many of you in this room have been involved in export strategy. We want to take trade information to a new level to create something called trade intelligence, where we really do leave, at the end of the day, a cadre of people within countries that actually understand the information related to trade. Exporter competitiveness is, of course, a very important issue, and we will continue to work on that. And we will continue to work and support trade institutions. We think this is very important because ITC cannot be with every SME in every country in the developing and transition economies. But we believe that if we can create partnerships with organizations such as yours, that you can be the conduit to reach to trade support, to reach to the SMEs and the private sector at large. And finally, we believe that export policy for business, which is to ensure that the public and private sector have the right kind of dialogue to actually bring forth the private sector views into the development of policy for business and export, that this is something that ITC will focus on as well. You've already heard that we have 2 publications which we have created for this event. I heard Anton telling you about it. Alleviating Poverty Through Trade, which is launched with Emerald Publishing, and also some provocative small pieces called Trade What If. The authors of most of these publications are here in the audience, and outside of that, we have so many experts in the room, people who are real practitioners, people who have actually felt the brunt of the pain in their own countries, that I think that this forum today, we should see the richness of the value of the knowledge which exists in the room. We certainly want to see the WEDF 2007 be the first step towards continuing to see ITC remain and become more relevant to you, our stakeholders. We certainly want to remain and become even more relevant to countries and the business communities, and of course, relevant to our donors. In fact, I believe that at the end of this exercise, we should see the quality of the debate be transformed. We should also expect that we should come out of this event with some new ideas or some new thinking behind how we can do things better, and that we can create a knowledge network of people involved in the whole business of export development. The challenge is not only about better formulating what ITC does, our business lines, which I've just spoken about, but also more fundamentally, the way that ITC works. So we hope that this event will be one of the first steps in the way of changing our conversation with you. And certainly the follow-up from this event will be even more important than the event itself if we are actually going to realize any of the benefits of the conversations which we have here today. Just before I close, I want to just do a little advertising for ITC, because that's always important. To talk about some of the work that we're doing. We're very much involved in a few post-conflict countries such as Sierra Leone and Liberia, where we are involved in trying to actually get trade moving again. We're working in the ginger industry and in the chili industry, developing farmers, getting people who were not working back into work. We're working with farmers from across Africa, supporting these countries, not just bringing expertise from Geneva to these countries, but using the experts of Africa to teach Africans how to do things better. We're very much involved in trying to produce what we call ethical fashion also in Africa. And we think that we're looking at how we can transform materials and the fashion industry within that region to make it more appropriate for the markets that they're targeting at. In Latin America, we continue to work with the pharmaceutical industry, manufacturers of pharmaceuticals for HIV, AIDS, malaria, and tuberculosis, trying to ensure that they can become part of the procurement machinery of the WHO by ensuring that they are producing to World Health Organization standards. In Africa and Asia, we're working on the business of organic agriculture, and in Latin America on services. In over 30 countries, we're working on the business of export strategies, ensuring that we have an export-oriented approach to the development of their countries, and of course looking at the whole business of poverty reduction as a way through the development of exports. Recently in Lima, Peru, for the Aid for Trade event there, we heard the President talking about developing an export culture. In many of our countries, an export culture is something which is quite foreign and something that many of you are battling to achieve. In our quest to achieve export success, it is my wish that we learn over the next few days what will contribute to your own export success and how ITC and its partners can indeed support you in this quest. Finally, in closing, I'd like to thank those organizations that supported this event, the State Secretariat for Economic Affairs, SECO of Switzerland, the Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency, SIDA of Sweden, the Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, BMZ of Germany, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Norway, the Government of Denmark, the Agency for International Trade, Information and Cooperation, ATIC of Switzerland. I really hope that today and for the next couple of days, we will hear from you the things that are of most critical importance. I want to hear what you are going to think about with respect to how Aid for Trade can help to move your countries forward. And we have the pleasure of having Pascal Lamy here today to talk a little bit about that. Certainly we would want to know for those countries that are part of the Enhanced Integrated Framework, how ITC's work with you can become even more relevant and impactful. So I wish you a very good debate, and I'm now going to hand over to Tim Sebastian and ask him to ensure that the debates are as lively and as stimulating as possible. So thank you again and welcome.